back to some Marshall football talk. So Charles Huff brings in a new offensive coordinator, Seth Doege from Purdue. He was formerly the tight ends coach there. He was also a former quarterback at Texas Tech under the late Mike Leach. Rest in peace to him.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of comes from that Mike Leach air raid offense, tutelage, if you will. And so we've heard, all offseason that, hey, Marshall's going to switch up offense, go from this, strong running game to perhaps an air raid offense. But what can you guys tell us about Seth Doege and what he'll bring to Marshall?
Man, I tell you, it's a little bit quiet, right? That Marshall always holds things close to the vest, always have. So it's a lot out there is just what we think might happen based on what we think these guys are and their pedigree, right? And you mentioned it. When you think of air raid offense, by and large, just about anybody who immediately thinks about the first coach that comes in their head is going to be Mike Leach. By and large, there are others, but Mike Leach is going to be the first and foremost in your brain, most likely. So you're a quarterback under Mike Leach. You're learning that offense literally firsthand from the guy. And let's bring it fast forward a little bit. You mentioned being a tight ends coach at Purdue last year. Offensive coordinator is Graham Harrell, one of the most decorated air raid type quarterbacks in Texas Tech history, right? So we're expecting, I'm just not sold that it's going to be a full blown air raid offense. I don't think we're going to see that 70 pass attempts a year or a game. I think we're going to see a modified ish type air raid offense. Marshall's just not going to abandon the run game the way we know it. There's too many good runners in the running back room to just do that. So I think we're just going to, Russ and I have continually talked about is like, I think we'll see the percentage, the run pass percentages just fade a little bit higher in that pass percentage rather than just an all out, 80-20 pass to run ratio. We think it might be that 60-40, 65-35 type thing. And so that's why we keep calling it this modified air raid.
Yeah. And if I had to say what I think that, I've talked to some people from the Texas area, from the people that know about Coach Doege and about, the air raid specifically because they followed those teams and everything. He knows what he's doing, and I don't think Coach Huff in a contract year, this is his final year under his current contract, would just say, well, I don't know, I'll give this guy a shot. You're talking about keys to the offense that he's giving him. And a coach like Charles Huff is not just going to say, I'll bet everything that I have on this thing that's unknown. He knows people. He knows people in this industry. And Coach Doege is obviously a rising star. He was there under Graham Harrell, as KD said. So I'm all in on bringing this in. And if you think back about some of the greatest offenses that Marshall had, you think quarterbacks, you think receivers, you think throwing the ball down the field. And that's what our fan base has clamored for years is let's get back to throwing the ball downfield. Let's get back. No bubble screens, no short 5-yard passes and all this. We want to stretch the field. And we have historically done that. And when we've done that, we've been really, really good. Mm-hmm. You think of Byron Leftwich, you think of Pennington, you think of Cato, you think of Moss and all the different wide receivers that we had, and some that aren't household names to everybody, but are definitely household names to us. I think we're going to get back to that. We brought in a lot of weapons to do so, which we're going to talk about, I'm sure, in this episode. But everything that you had in those non-air raid years, when we think about Marshall stretching the field, every single year we had great running backs and we had tremendous running back stats from there. We never have just totally abandoned the run. It's always been very balanced, and I think that's what we're going to have is a balanced air raid is what I'm calling it.
Yep.
So there's one key difference, I think, in that Mike Leach tree, right? So you have the Mike Leach style of air raid, and then you have the Graham Harrell style of air raid. And to me, like the biggest difference between the two is how the running backs are utilized. So in the Mike Leach offense, the running backs are targeted heavily in the passing game, right? They're getting 60 targets, a season, 5 to 10 targets a game. But then in the Graham Harrell offense, the running backs aren't quite as heavily targeted. aren't as big a part of the passing game. Do you think Coach Doege leans one way or the other in terms of that utilization of the running backs in the passing game? Or
I would say,
I think what he's going to find when he gets there is that, hey, man, this Ethan Payne kid can catch the daggone football out of the backfield. We've seen it firsthand. We've seen those downfield kind of circus over-the-shoulder catches that you really don't expect the back to make. So I'm not sure that you lean one way or the other. You think, all right, well, maybe it boils down to a matchup thing. It's like we think Ethan can maybe take advantage of some guys on this particular defense. So let's work it in a little bit more. And maybe on other defenses, you're like, you know what? Let's just focus on our speed guys on the perimeter. Let's try to work those tight ends, and let's just let the running backs run, you know? So I think it's going to be his own thing, honestly. I don't think he's going to say, I'm going to do the Harrell style or I'm going to do the Leach style. It's going to be the Doege style is what I feel like.
I always equate this to something that is non-sports, but I took over a group that I was under a mentor of ours, and KD was in that same thing. I took it over. What I did was I honored what came before me, but I definitely made it my own, you know, and that's the way that I equate coaching with. When you get that shot is, Coach Huff was under Saban. But, you know, he gets here, he's not going to have Saban's recruits and stuff like that. So he's got to modify his stuff to this. It's going to be the same thing under Graham Harrell. I think there's going to be a lot of Seth Doege looking to how Graham Harrell did it. But he's also going to say, well, if I ever got the shot, I would put my spin on it by doing this. So, again, I think it's going to be modified. We may be talking 5-10 years down the road. Someone else on a podcast would be saying, now, is it the Graham Harrell style or is it the Seth Doege style? You know, so that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the position that, you know, is going to be slinging the pigskin around. They lost their starter from last year in Cam Fancher, but they brought in Braylon Braxton from Tulsa. However, we got to see a few glimpses from Cole Pennington last year. How did Pennington look in the spring?
Russ, take this one.
Well, I was at the game, and I was at the game. He looked pretty good. He and Colin Parachek were the two standouts at the quarterback. They were on opposing teams. Braxton and also Ja'Kai Long were also getting reps in there, so that were the four quarterbacks that got it. Pennington and Parachek both looked pretty good. I will say this with a caveat, though. I have been to many what we call the green and white game, spring game. And I never put any stock into it. It's one of these things that it's a practice that fans just kind of get to come to. Mm-hmm. I never come out of that saying, wow, here's exactly what our football team is going to look like. You know, I never get disappointed by it. Sometimes we hold people out or they're not going more than 75% because maybe they've got a slightly nagging injury, a hamstring that's not torn or pulled or anything like that, but they don't want to hamper this person. So they don't even say, turn the Jets on. You know, quarterbacks are definitely no hit. You know, they'll have different jerseys on. You can't touch them. I think that Pennington will do pretty well in this offense. But I can't say anything from what happened in spring that I can 100% translate to say, here's exactly what he'll do.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. I think, of course, the summer practices are going to go a lot farther in determining who's going to be your week one starter. And I just don't know who that's going to be. You know, that you got new offensive coordinator, tons of new wide receivers in on the roster, tons of new offensive linemen on the roster. There's so many moving parts. You know, the only one that has meaningful game action in a Herd uniform is Cole Pennington. And in the games that he started those games rough. He put himself behind the eight ball early. I mean, we're talking about interceptions like nearly immediately. And that's tough for a young quarterback to bounce back from, you know, and he made some great plays, you know, but those are the lumps you take with a young quarterback. We know that. Yeah. That's a story as old as time itself. Right. So what you're hoping as a Herd fan this year is that another year of off-season preparation, another off-season of reps and practices, and I can't really think of anybody else better to be picking the brain of from a quarterback position than Chad Pennington, right? One of the most intelligent quarterbacks ever at any level of football. So there's some positives there, but it all boils down to, can you execute? And fans, for better or worse, they just want Cole Pennington to succeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so many of them, I still feel unjustly look at Cole and see Chad. And that's just not fair. It's just not fair. Cole's his own guy. And we were fortunate enough to meet him just at random when we were on campus, and he came in. We were walking through the Cam Henderson Center, the basketball arena, and he came in, and we stopped and talked to him for a second. And I told him, I made a point to tell him that, like, there are fans out there that see you as Cole Pennington, not Chad Pennington's son. Right. And he was like, thank you. Appreciate that. And I think that does go a long way. But back to your question, new quarterbacks coming in. Does Cole make the leap? Does Colin Parachek get a good opportunity in the summer after having a really good spring game? Then he went in the portal and out of the portal. That's the greatest of all the questions right now surrounding Herd football. Who is going to be QB1, and whoever rises out of that room to be QB1, are they going to be able to adequately execute Seth Doege's modified air raid offense?
Would you put that you kind of feel right now that Pennington's that number one, Parachek 2, and then Braxton yet to be determined, but probably the 3?
I can't say that.
No, I would say right now that it would probably be a race between Pennington and Braxton, and then Parachek is a firm number 3, Ja'Kai Long, a true freshman, number 4, likely to redshirt, I would say. But again, we have not gone through fall practice or started fall practice, and in today's portal world, there's still quarterbacks out there. And it would not shock me if we took a flyer on another quarterback, because we had Mitch Griffiths was going to be in the mix on this, and he retired from football. He had committed and transferred to us, and then he wasn't even really on campus. He was still at Wake Forest finishing up, and wasn't here for the spring. And then he wasn't here, couldn't practice, because the time that he was here, maybe filling out paperwork or getting ready to attend summer school or whatever, he decided to retire. It was a dead period for practice. So we were intending on going in with another quarterback in the mix. So it would not shock me if we got somebody else in the portal before fall practice starts.
Moving on to the running game, Marshall has a great history of a strong running game for many years. They do lose their leading rusher from a year ago and 5th round NFL selection to the Baltimore Ravens, Rasheen Ali. But the aforementioned Ethan Payne returns on top of some others from that room. And then they also bring in Jordan Houston coming over from NC State. What can you tell us about the running backs and how they looked in the spring?
I think overall, you can't look. Ali's gone, so it's tough to hear this and think, oh, okay. But I think it's improved, right? Because Ali's not there. So versus last year, of course it's not improved. Ali was great. But depth-wise, I think it's improved, right? Ethan Payne is just such a throwback of a player. So many people sitting in the stands at Jones C. Edwards Stadium love when they put the ball in his belly and just watching him run, because he's the run over you type back that so many people like in Huntington, West Virginia. He's just so much fun to watch. He's a local kid, local-ish, Poca High School, Poca, West Virginia, right? So folks love cheering for those in-state kids to come and play for the Herd. And when they do well, they're easy to root for. I think that adding Jordan Houston says a lot. I think that says that, to me, that feels like your 1-2 punch out of the gate. But that ain't it. AJ Turner is a guy who's been on the roster for a couple of years. He's shown flashes in the past. He's shifty and shaky. He's speedy. He can get it done. It's just a matter of how many carries is he going to get this year, right? How are they going to distribute? If we're talking 35% of the offense is going to be the run game, that's not a lot of carries, right? How are those carries going to get distributed? But AJ Turner is a guy that can get to the end zone on any given play. And then you talk about guys like one-time Wisconsin Badger, Antoine Roberts. He joined the roster last year from JUCO. He got a little bit of game. He looked good in his limited action. And then an interesting, intriguing prospect that comes to the herd this year through this portal cycle from Division III DuPage. Deuce Young is a guy in the Chicago area that is just really intriguing. The stats don't blow you away. 414 yards last year at D3 DuPage on, I think it was like 70 carries or something like that. That's not bad. You're looking at almost 6 yards a carry, but it's just an intriguing prospect. If you watch a little bit of the film, you go, this guy could be something at the Sun Belt level, especially if Marshall's got a really good offensive line. This guy, he could hurt you if he gets a little bit of opportunity. So I like the depth overall in the Marshall running back room, but let's just be honest. There ain't no replacing Rasheen Ali with one guy. It ain't going to happen. He's just too daggone great.
Yeah, and Ethan Payne came in relief, as if you can use a baseball term here for Ali. Ali gets hurt, is not in the James Madison game, and 1/4 of the carries that Ethan Payne gets on the year come from that game. And then the very last game, Arkansas State, he picks up another 19, which is also very close to 1/4 of it. And that was a game that Ali was in. And they, just had Fancher, Ali, and Payne just ran wild all over Arkansas State. And then second half of the bowl game against UTSA, he gets 11 carries. So the bulk of his carries, over 60-some%, are in that 3 games there. He, other than that, I think was 8 carries was the most he got, and sometimes he got 2, sometimes he got 3. He was not an every down back until we needed him to be. He is more of a fullback traditionally, but he has the ability to go in there and play the tailback, the running back. I don't think we're going to have a feature back like we had last year, like we had the year before when Ali was hurt and we had Kalen Laburn in there. I think that we're going to have a committee running back, and I just feel like we're going to be up tempo. And I feel like with up tempo, we're going to trade out our running backs a lot. And that's just the feeling I have. I can't tell you that's because I have any inside knowledge or that's what I got from the spring game, because I didn't. But I just feel like we're going to go with more tempo, get the ball up and down the field. We've got plenty of wide receivers, plenty of running backs to put in there. But I'm with KD. Jordan Houston looks good. AJ Turner looks good. I think that we have enough depth there and guys that we can put in, and they all bring something that is multifaceted. It's not just that we've got one guy's speed and that's all he's got. One guy's a receiving back and that's all he's got. All of them do very well at what they do. But the one key that I think that will put someone on the field, the majority over someone else, is how well they block, because we're doing an air raid. And look no further than Ethan Payne. He blocks very well.
Yep.
So, you mentioned it'd probably be more of a committee than a one workhorse type system. Would you say, I'm just trying to read between the lines, so like 40% Payne, 40% Houston, and then maybe that other group makes up that other 20%? Or how, if you put...
I don't know. That's hard to say.
Yeah.
It's just really hard to say. It depends. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what kind of a pass catcher Jordan Houston is, and that could turn out to be what separates who's on the field more, because we know that Ethan Payne is a good pass catcher, a reliable pass catcher, and doesn't mind, putting the head down and taking the hit, getting the extra yard, getting the hard yard. And that's the kind of stuff that Marshall has needed the past couple of years. They've needed to get those hard yards, and sometimes we couldn't get them, and if this sputters, if this air raid type offense takes a little while to get legs under it, well, you can't be affording to go 3 and out all the time. You're going to need those hard yards, right? And that is the wheelhouse of an Ethan Payne. So Jordan Houston, I think, can get the hard yard if he's running the ball, but I don't know enough about him. I haven't seen enough of him to know if he's that type of guy through the air, So I do just thinking I haven't thought about that 40-40 and 20 amongst everybody else. That might be the perfect recipe. Couldn't tell you, but I think you'll see a little bit of everybody. I really do.
Yeah, I can tell you Jordan Houston had some good receiving stats, and in the message board dive that I did when he came over here, and some of their fans at NC State was talking about how well he caught the ball out of the backfield and things like that. I think 2022 he had 25 receptions out of the backfield and a touchdown awesome. For 200 plus yards. So he can get it done. Again, I think it's going to go back to who picks up this system and who picks up the blocks in this system. Ratio, I would lean more toward picking 4 guys and saying 25, 25, 25, 25. And from there, it's like whoever has the hot hand, they eke up to 30. Whoever, is, if you got a couple of fumbles, you miss some blocks or whatever, that 25 is coming way down. But I think we may see as many as 4 different backs early in the season to see who has what if we're coming out of fall practice not knowing who stands out. Again, if we were there every day of fall practice and we did this episode 2 months from now, I could probably tell you who it's going to be. But right now, I don't know.
Well, the passing game lost over 90% of its yards from a year ago. What did this staff do to address the wide receiver room?
Man,
everything.
Have you paid attention at all to the Thundercast.online transfer portal tracker? Because man, oh man, it is heavy on the wide receiver from the portal in standpoint. They went out and got some guys. They really did.
Yeah.
And they recruited some more guys. I know you've probably got a list of some of them, for sure. Fans have immediately been clamoring over guys like Christian Fitzpatrick from Michigan State, 6'4", 222. Yeah, I like that too, right? And then you talk about guys like Doc Chapman from North Carolina, who Russ and I just previewed a little bit in our special teams position group breakdown episode. We like him to be one of those guys in the mix to be in some of those returner spots. Elijah Metcalf, another G5 dude coming over from Middle Tennessee State, bringing his lightning speed over to the herd. Braylon Brown coming in from Ole Miss. And then let's not forget Chuck Montgomery. And I mentioned this in our episode. I'm not sure we've had a guy who is as exciting as Chuck Montgomery that's being talked about less for as long as I can remember at Marshall. The kid can just play, man. And I think it's fallen vastly under the radar because we didn't have that explosive offense through the air last year. We saw flashes from Chuck a couple of years ago. We saw some more flashes this past season. And he's one of my personal, favorites to kind of like it. This is the year. This is the year for him. But there's no bones about it. They went out and got wide receivers. They knew they had to bolster that room. They had to rebuild and reload that room. And they went and did it. And this is the first year for wide receivers coach, another Herd all-time great, Aaron Dobson. Most folks will remember him from that awesome backhanded catch against East Carolina so many years ago. He was elevated from an offensive analyst role to be the full-time wide receivers coach this year. And I trust him to teach the finer points of playing wide receiver at Marshall University, right? That ain't the same as playing at school XYZ. When you play at Marshall and you're from Marshall, it means a little bit something extra. And Aaron Dobson's he's an all-time great. So he knows the pressure of walking through the tunnel at Jones C. Edwards Stadium. He can adequately explain the feeling of what it's like hearing "We Are" and Marshall. He knows what it means to play that 75-week game. So he's going to be able to impart this knowledge on these guys outside of the X's and O's stuff. And I think that's going to go a tremendously long way when it's a new offensive rebuild. It's things like that are going to be a difference maker. Guys can run, guys can catch, and guys can make moves and break tackles. I am unbelievably intrigued to see what this starting lineup is going to look like when they trot out in week 1. I am like everybody else. We're all speculating, like, who's it going to be? We like this guy. You think it'll be that guy? And I think there's so many weapons here. If they get the right quarterback, it could be one of those Katie bar the door scenarios, because the athletes at the wide receiver position are absolutely there.
Yeah, and piggyback on what KD said, we had a few more transfer in that I'll mention by name. Ty Perkins was a local kid about 30 minutes away from Marshall over in Ohio at Ironton, and he transferred from Cincinnati. He's 6'3". We bring in 6'1" Carl Chester from Tulsa and 6'1" Braylon Brown from Ole Miss. So brought in some height, brought in some shorter guys that are burners. If you go up and look at the 60-yard times in high school for Tyshawn Doc Chapman, it's unreal what this kid can do. Look on YouTube at what he can do and what he did at North Carolina in a very pass-heavy offense down there. We also returned DeMarcus Harris, who transferred in last year. He was formerly at Kentucky. And Brian Robinson, who's been here for 2 years, that was formerly at Florida State. So our wide receiver room is deep. It's who is going to be the top 5, really. And it reminds me a lot of when we were when Byron Leftwich was here, and our top 3 guys were putting up stats that were blowing away people in other colleges. Like the 3rd guy on the depth chart as far as pass catches would be leading at other institutions. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see. But 6'4", 6'3", 6'1", 6'1", already had some 6'1s on the roster, and then you got a couple of 5'9", and Metcalf is listed on here as 5'6". I've seen him anywhere from 5'6" to 5'9", but we've got a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone stand out in the spring?
Yes and no. A lot of them did with different moves and receptions and such, but like just the nature of the way that they did it, they didn't like target somebody 15 times and they had 2 touchdowns. In fact, the wide receiver that had the most touchdowns was a lot lower on the depth chart, and he transfer portaled out the very next day after the spring game.
Yeah,
he scored 2 touchdowns and then transferred out, but it wasn't anyone that anyone was looking and saying, hey, this guy is probably going to be the number 1 wide receiver. He's going to be at your X, your Y, your Z, whatever you want to call anybody. And so people did stand out, but not like, we would determine on how it would impact this season.
Yeah, see, like the way they stood out to me is like a guy would make an unbelievable singular catch. Yeah. It wasn't an eye-popping stat line. It was like, oh, wow, look at the move that this particular wideout made on this particular play. So, yes, some guys stood out, but probably not in the way you were asking. And I wasn't going to say that, but he's right. The guy that had the best overall game hit the portal the very next day, which is just funny to me.
It's today's college football, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you maybe don't know what this wide receiver room looks like week 1. If you had to put a wide receiver core out there, what's your starting lineup that you guys are putting out there?
KD, you go first.
How many do I have to pick? 3 or 4 or what am I?
4.
3.
3. All right. If I'm picking 3 right out of the gate, it's Chuck Montgomery without a doubt. It's going to be DeMarcus Harris because he's been here and he's actually performed for us a little bit. And I think it's going to be Elijah Metcalf, and that gives me my super speedster, my little bit of a downfield stretch, and then Chuck Montgomery, who I just think is going to be, a big time weapon this year. And if I have to pick a 4th, I think it's going to be Christian Fitzpatrick. You just can't teach 6'4", 222 as an outside threat.
Yeah, so KD and I will do our customary $1 bet and see who does better. But I'm going Fitzpatrick, I'm going Chapman, and I'm going Chuck Montgomery if I only have 3. If I have to put 4 in there, I might put Metcalf in, but I'm more likely to put another tall receiver out there, and it could be Brian Robinson, DeMarcus Harris, somebody that's been here already, or it might be Braylon Brown from Ole Miss or someone like that Carl Chester. But I want a little bit of height on the outside as well. Fitzpatrick to me is a no-brainer starter at 6'4". Chuck Montgomery to me is a no-brainer starter. And I think Chapman is a no-brainer with his speed and elusiveness and everything. But that's the Russ Livingood theory.
From what you were able to see in the spring and what you've heard so far, how would you describe the tight end usage in this new offense?
I don't know about usage, but I think this is one of Marshall's premier positions on this entire roster. I think tight end is probably, just given how many there are, there's only a few, 5 or 6 or whatever, it's probably the deepest position, percentage-wise, because you're probably looking at 3 to 4 of those guys are going to see time. Cade Conley is an all Sun Belt Conference tight end. He came in last year from Central Michigan, and we were unsure of who's this guy. What's he gonna be? And he is far more dynamic of a threat than I thought he was going to be. He's a known entity now, right? Without it, he's not sneaking up on anybody in 2024. Toby Payne is a guy who was going to be that they were going to be Batman and Robin, man. And Toby was injured early in the season, and we lost him for the entire season. And yeah, that name sounds familiar. That's Ethan's younger brother. So the brothers Payne are both on the roster at Marshall. Toby is an utter mismatch, man. He really is. He and Conley are going to wreak havoc in some sets when they're both on the field with Lord knows who they're lining up at wideout. I mean, the possibilities are really endless with what they can do with these guys. Justin Holmes is a transfer that comes in from Kent State. He started 12 games there last year. So you've got a guy who's played meaningful football at a previous stop. So it's not all brand new, so to speak. And then you got a couple of freshmen. I think we see at least one of those guys play. At some point they're going to get some snaps. And I don't know which it will be, if it will be Tracy Stevens or if it will be Aiden Steinfeld. But I like Aiden Steinfeld because he was Mr. Football in the state of Indiana from the tight end position. I mean, I think tight end is kind of just what their family does, because he's got an older brother that's a tight end. He was at Indiana, and I think he hit the portal, and I'm not sure if he's come out of the portal yet, but they're just a family. Apparently the Steinfelds are a family of tight ends. So this is the one position on the entire roster that I have zero concerns or worries about. I think Marshall is loaded at tight end.
Yeah, the only thing I have to add, because that was an excellent overview of everything that we have at tight end, the only thing about Toby Payne, he and Ethan are local kids from, again, 30 minutes up the road in West Virginia, but they are both old school. They are both tough. They were both, as some referee friends, some friends that went to that high school have all told me when they were in high school, the kids are just studs. They are athletes. And Toby Payne is a 6'4", 239 athlete that makes athletic catches, but he's fast. He is strong. He had that knee injury last year that basically robbed him of the entire season, but he's someone to look out for. Cade Conley had the stats last year, and again, that's on partial time because he got injured. But Toby Payne is one to look out for this year.
So you mentioned, Conley kind of leading the tight end of the stats last year. Do you think that happens again, or based on this depth, it's going to be probably more spread out?
I don't
it'll
know.
probably be more spread out, but it's not far fetched to say that Conley will lead those tight ends statistically. It
Sure.
just may not be, head and shoulders above what it was this past season, because again, Payne was only on the field maybe a game and part
Yeah,
of
it was one
another,
game.
So these guys are definitely going to split time. They're going to split numbers. But I mean, hey, Cade Conley could easily lead the team in tight end receptions and receiving yards and touchdowns, but
Yeah.
they'll be a hell of a lot closer than those numbers were last year.
All right, the Herd lost just about everyone from that offensive line. Their lone starting returner is their center, Logan Osborne. Just like the wide receivers, I'm going to ask, what did the coaching staff do to address these losses?
The portal giveth, man. I got to boomerang back to our transfer portal tracker article, because it's also pretty heavy on the offensive line side of things. And I expect of the 5 that I think will trot out there week 1, 2 of those are guys that were here. Of course, Logan Osborne is one that you mentioned. I think 3 of the 5 will end up being transfers in. The 5th guy, to me, I think is going to be Jalen Slappy. He's a guy that Coach Huff has referenced many times over the course of a couple of seasons. And it might not have always been from like an in-game production like standpoint. It sometimes it's from, how he has how he and strength and conditioning coach Ben Ashford have changed his body. You know what I mean? And he looks the part more. So I think he's just proven that he belongs on that line. But no, man, from the portal, they went out and what was it? Like one day we got like 3 or 4 linemen in the portal in one day or something
3.
like that. But
we got 3 in one day.
Yeah, there have been a lot, and these guys, there's a mix of guys that are coming from these power schools that don't have a lot of experience there, and then there are some guys that have come in that have played a lot of ball at their previous stop. I don't know, man. This to me, I don't want to call it worrisome, but it's always the wild card on any football team. Unless you're returning your line mostly from year over year, this is always the wild card. Like, how will the line look? Because if the line doesn't perform well, is anything going to perform well offensively? So that this is the biggest cause for pause for me is the line. And that's not that I'm not knocking these guys. It's just I don't know. I don't know what they're going to look like. I don't have a clue. There's so many of them, and you're replacing 4 of 5. I mean, that's a lot. We had to replace, I don't remember how many it was last year, maybe 2 or 3 coming in, and so we're doing it kind of again. But I don't know. The transfer portal era takes away a lot of the familiarity with your roster, and it's becoming very apparent to me at this particular position group. But new offensive line coach comes in, Cody Creel, and that's where I'm putting my faith, because this guy has experience as an offensive coordinator in an air raidish type offense. He comes to the Herd from most recently in the XFL, wasn't it, Russ?
He's
kind of been all over.
Incarnate Word.
Yeah, that's where he was offensive coordinator, was at Incarnate Word. And so I like what Cody Creel has to work with. And that's where I'm putting my faith in the coach to be able to put the right 5 in the right spot.
I'll tell you something without getting into specific names of who came in. This is more about last year. We had some individual really good offensive line players. As a team, I don't think that they meshed well. And, a couple of them just went to the NFL, so we're not talking about like they weren't good, but as a unit, they did not do as well in pass coverage. In running the ball, they did great. The blocking was there. I mean, the past 2 years, we had some horses up there that just made this offense go, and it was good offensive line. they have struggled the last couple of years in pass protection as a team. Not any one individual person was bad at it. As a team, it just didn't seem like it was doing well. And that's why I'm glad that Cody Creel is here and with the experience that he has. And I look for our pass protection as a unit to improve. And I've said it from day one of this podcast, and I will say it the very last time that we ever record this podcast. Your offense is as good as your offensive line is. And also, there is no other unit that needs to be synonymous and play together as one than your offensive line. So that's what I'm looking for this year, is what five will play together in the best possible pass and run blocking and protection that we can do.
I'm kind of thinking now that you could talk about the offensive line and what could work and not work is, Braxton comes over from Tulsa. You mentioned him being in the mix there for that number one, and he's more of that athletic running type quarterback. It's almost like Marshall has like hedged their bets. Like, hey, maybe, let's say they want, Pennington to be the guy, but our offensive line doesn't allow Pennington to be that guy. We're able to pivot to Braxton, or, maybe, we think it's going to be Porce here, and it ends up things are shored up and we can get Pennington out there. I mean, honestly, you want the best guy out there for the job, whoever that is. But like, it almost seems like Marshall did a really good job of being flexible and being able to go either way.
Well, you're really describing exactly what we had last year. You had a mobile quarterback that, when healthy, was really, really effective. The problem was he was not always healthy, and he wasn't always like kind of hurt. He was noticeably hurt, and once his mobility went away, he was kind of a setting duck at times, and it was tough. I hated that for the kid, because he stood in there and took shots and he kept competing. Yeah. And this is the same type of quarterback, that you're bringing in from Tulsa, is a guy that can throw the ball and run the ball and be a little elusive in the pocket and create some additional time. But also let's put to that point, Marshall also brought in an offensive lineman from Tulsa. So not do you just go get a guy, you go get a guy that's familiar with the guy that you brought in to play quarterback. So Marshall brought in overall 3 guys from Tulsa, a quarterback, an offensive lineman, and a wide receiver. These dots begin to start to connect a little bit, but still, I can't sit here and say Braxton's the guy. You can't, but they did go get an offensive lineman for him from his former team. They did get a wide receiver for his former team. But I think there's enough here that they will find 5 guys that obviously can start, but I think there's enough here that they could go 8 or 9 deep and be able to weather the storm of some injuries and be okay. I think if you get in a scenario where you lose 3 guys for some significant time, man, you might be singing a different tune. But I think they've done enough in the portal to this point to weather the storm of some injuries and be able to rotate some guys in and guys out and fit the need, so to speak.
I'll tell you a couple people that I think to look out for. And again, this is just pure speculation on spring game, but also, how they performed at other places. But Bryce Ramsey comes over from Southern Miss, 6'1", 327. I look for Elijah Ellis, 6'4", 331 from Baylor that came over. But also we have a couple of redshirt freshmen. Isaac Clary is from right up the road, 30 minutes from Gallipolis, Ohio, 6'7", 334. And we have Jalen Slappy that Katie talked about. He came in and started a few games at the end of last year, and it just seemed like the offensive line play improved when he came in. I think that he just fit that group better. But Logan Osborne is a local kid, and he's a 5th-year senior with us, and I think that he is going to anchor everybody. Lastly, I'm looking for here. Man, I can't think of who it was. Sean Rouse is a redshirt freshman from Cabell Midland, which is right up the road from Huntington, 10 minutes away. I think that we're going to have a mix of young and a mix of transfers in that can step in and try to find a cohesive 5-man unit that can pass block the way we need to in an air raid offense.
Mm-hmm.
You guys had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024. Who would that player be?
Well, the cheap cop out is whoever's quarterback won. It has to be that guy. Got to be. But if let's say we get that guy, and I have to pick somebody else, for me, I've said it so many times already, it's Chuck Montgomery. He's my guy this year. I feel like he's the guy who can just captivate that crowd with the electricity that he keeps in those cleats. You know, he's got the ability to do that. Can he put it together enough times this year to be that game-breaking wide receiver that Marshall needs? I feel like he's the guy.
I'm going to go Christian Fitzpatrick, and I'm going with him because of the height. I think that you can get away with a couple of bad balls, throwing them up in the air to someone 6'4" with a good vertical. And we did okay without comparing him to Randy Moss, but we did okay with a tall wide receiver on the outside before. But I really think that he's got something to prove to come here. Kind of felt like he was underutilized or could have been utilized better at Michigan State. So he's now got to come here and do that. Obviously, we have to throw the ball well to get it to him. That's what, but not saying he's MVP, saying he's breakout player. That's who I'm going with as breakout players. Christian Fitzpatrick putting up a very big year.
All right. If you are watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.